Assalamu alaikum, I'm Yusuf. I'm originally Irish background, grew up in Liverpool, and then about 7 years ago I moved to Wales. Liverpool is a rough place to grow up in. It's not easy. I grew up on a council estate. Father didn't work, mother did, but it wasn't an easy lifestyle to grow up with. It wouldn't be rare to, because I was raised a Catholic, so it wouldn't be rare when you're in the church to see heroin needles, things like that, outside the church, and people walking around with weapons. It's not a nice place to grow up, but also there are a lot of good people there, like a lot of people that influenced my life in a good way. It's kept me out of trouble where that's concerned, because it is really easy to get into trouble there. But I had a lot of friends, 2 friends in particular, who were basically like brothers, and they kept me on the straight path. I got into rugby instead of getting into anything bad. So sport also kept me away from that. It was tough for her because she'd be working 9 to 5 job. She had a very stressful job. She worked with criminals law kind of thing, so she had to be what's called the appropriate adult for someone who'd been arrested or something like that. So she'd have to go in, and she could get called at any time. It wasn't just a 9 to 5 job. So she had a lot of stress on her, and then she had to obviously look after me, who was quite I didn't get into trouble that much, but I wasn't the easiest child to have. And my sister wasn't the easiest as well, because she was very young. She's 5 years younger than me, so she was 3, 4 when I was 8, 9. So when I started, we moved to Wales when I was about 11, and we moved to Llanelli, and while we were there, I got involved in quite a bad scene, alcohol and things like that, and then that must have been horrible for her to have to deal with, because I had to phone her at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "Mum, can you pick me up? I'm drunk somewhere, I don't know where I am, come find me." And the stress she must have had for knowing whenever I was going out what I was getting up to, that kind of thing. So she is one of my biggest inspirations, purely because of how she could keep the food on the table, keep us fed, keep me out of trouble, and make sure my sister was raised well, because obviously we had no father there. So it was difficult for her, very difficult. Well, my mother wasn't that religious. My grandparents are the religious ones. They're the very devout Catholics. So my mother she wouldn't go to church herself, but she let me go to church. Unfortunately, my mother blamed God for a lot of what had happened, because we'd been through quite a lot, and so she blamed God for that in that sense. So she became more of an atheist than anything at one stage. But obviously you're raised in an Irish culture, Catholic culture. You call yourself Catholic even if you don't particularly follow the faith. But my grandparents made sure that I went to church whenever I was down there. They were a great influence, because they brought religion into my life in a time where I was questioning whether God even existed. So they kept religion there. So they kept me going to church, and that was very good, because I've always believed in God, but obviously it's the other bits that I questioned. So yeah, when you grow up in an Irish Catholic background, you don't ever let your grandparents know what you've got up to, because if you do, they'll get pretty upset with you, and there's a lot of shame when you see an Irish boy going out drinking, things like that. The community knows, the community then gets back to the community. After my mum and dad split, my grandparents have always lived in Wales, so I think my mum wanted a strong point where, because unfortunately my grandfather, who lived in Liverpool, my father's father, passed away. So there was nowhere really for us to go when she was at work, kind of thing. So we wanted to move somewhere that we had close family who could look after me or Ella, my sister, when mum was working, or if mum had to go, because she's often called to do conferences in Manchester, Liverpool, London. So while that was happening, she'd be away for 2 days at a time. So it was good for me and my sister to live by my grandparents, so we could just go to my grandparents and stay there while she's away. In primary school, I was very, very good at sticking to the rules, being a good boy kind of thing. But as soon as I got into secondary school, because I started secondary school when we were in Wales, so as soon as I got into secondary school, I went to a Catholic secondary school in Llanelli, and I started to not go to lessons or mitch here and there, or I got involved with the wrong group of people in the school. We'd be behind the sheds smoking instead of going to lessons and things like this, and I started smoking at a very young age, which I regret so much. But yeah, growing up in that school, the teachers were very strict, besides one or two. Because it was Catholic, the teachers would go to detention, do this, do that, and they wouldn't talk to you about why you're doing what you're doing. They wouldn't try and find out the reason behind it, so you just wanted to rebel more. When they told you you can't go here or you can't go there, you can't leave the school premises, you'd want to leave the school premises just because they said you can't. And yeah, there was a lot of racism in the school, because a lot of Polish people had come over, and there's a lot of Polish population in Llanelli, and because Poland is mainly Catholic, they came to the Catholic school, and the British kids saw it as, oh, they're taking over the school kind of thing. And then that's when me and a friend of mine got into serious trouble, because we stood up for the Polish. So by standing up for them, we ended up making enemies there, and then we got into fights. I got into a few fights in school, which then got me into trouble even further. And at the end, in year 9, I was predicted A's at GCSE. I ended up with 7 C's, 1 B, and E and a U. So I ended up a lot lower than what I should have got, purely because I wasted my time going out drinking, smoking, getting into fights, getting into trouble, and that kind of ruined my secondary school education. Well, my mother is very, very equal rights. She's brought me up like that. She has a very good saying, there's only one race, the human race. So she brought me up in that way, that whenever I saw racism, it was one thing that I really despised, one thing that I hated. So I always wanted to fight against it whenever I saw it. I was also the kind of guy that wanted to always go against the majority, so I always wanted to be the little rebel kind of thing. So since everyone was being racist, I wanted to be anti it, so I was the one standing against it and being rebellious in that sense, because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed playing devil's advocate. I enjoyed being in trouble with other kids, not particularly with the staff, but with other kids. I enjoyed the adrenaline you'd get, things like that, from arguing or fighting with the kids. So that's why I stood up for them, because A, I felt it was wrong, and B, it was kind of a rush for me to stand up against, because there was about 2 Polish people and about 10 British people there. So standing up against 10 when you only have 2 it's a bit of a rush, and that's why I did it. But I regret getting into those kind of trouble now, because that fight got me into trouble, which then cost me going to Oakwood, which is a theme park, which I really regret not go into, because obviously it was a fun experience. Everyone was talking about it. For the next 3 weeks I couldn't talk to them because they were all talking about Oakwood and I didn't go. So yeah, they got me into a lot of trouble. She started to say, "Oh, why are you going to church? Why are you praying? He's never done anything for us. Why should I do anything for him?" kind of thing. That was her mentality. She saw the idea that if God is in control of everything, then why is he punishing me when I haven't done anything wrong? We went through a stage of complete poverty when we were in Wales, and because she got made redundant, and then after that started to blame God quite a lot for what had happened, and even I myself started to blame God a little bit, but not to the extent that she did. It became to her a hatred more than anything after a while, because she couldn't see how anyone who loved us, why would he do that to us? But recently she accepted Islam. She accepted Islam about 2 weeks ago. She doesn't pray or anything, but she sent me a message saying there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And that made me very happy. I was shocked to see it, because I was shocked, how is someone who's dead set against God done that? But yeah, she accepted it, and now she's extremely happy with the belief that she has. Well, first I ever heard of it was I was in school, and I was only 13 or something in an RE class, and they showed us Hajj, and I saw these millions and millions of people going around this black box and praying, and I was like, well, how are these millions and millions of people united in prayer? There must be something there. But then that phase left I was there for about a week, and then that left, and I forgot all about it. And then as soon as I got into college, I met someone who was Muslim, and she taught me a lot about Islam. She was quite westernized herself, but she was devout in her faith, in the sense that she'd pray 5 times a day and everything. So it was through meeting her that I questioned Islam, and then I got given a book, The Miracles of the Quran, and I was reading how it has embryology, the parting of the oceans, and when I listened to the Quran and I listened to the beautiful poetry of it, and I started thinking, how is this not from God? How can anyone question this? Like, we got embryology here, we got things that was known to them 1400 years ago, but unknown to us, 50 years ago. The earth being round is in the West, we only found that out in the 1600s. It's quite shocking when you read it, and then I just thought to myself, how could I not accept this as the true religion? How can I not take this on? Because it's all there. I'm quite an academic, I'm a historian, so when I see facts, I have to accept them. If they're there in front of me, you can't deny them, they're there. I was doing my A-levels at the time, and she was in my politics class. So we started having debates and discussions, because obviously in a politics class it's quite a normal thing to do. So we started having a discussion. I think it was Nick Griffin made a speech about the Islamification of the UK or something like that. And there was someone in my class who was very BNP, and obviously me being anti-racist wanted to argue against this person. And they were saying Muslims do this, Muslims do that, and I was thinking, I don't know anything about Muslims. Why don't I go talk to a Muslim, find out about Muslims so I can debate against this guy? So I spoke to her about it, because she was the only Muslim that I knew. And I said, what's his faith? What do you believe in? What's this? What's that? Why do you wear a hijab? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you pray 5 times a day? Why do Muslim men have beards? Why do some Muslim women cover their face? What's this about? And once I'd learned that, that's when I started to accept it quite a lot. I mean, I was scared of it because after that, when I went to the mosque for the first time, I met some people who were on a rather extreme angle, and they were telling me about, if you don't do this, you go to hell, you don't do that, you go to hell, and then all this, and then that scared me quite a lot. I got very scared, and I thought, oh no, if I don't pray with my feet touching the other person and my shoulder touching the other person, I'm going to go to hell, this kind of thing. And I couldn't believe it. I got to a point where I was actually going out on the street giving dawah to people, telling them that if they don't do this, they're going to hell. And apparently these people that I got involved with, they wait for reverts to walk into the mosque and they go up and talk to them. And then it wasn't until I met someone very close to me now that I calmed down quite a lot. I started to think, this feet touching thing, all this little tiny details, they're not huge. Why should I point at that person and call them a kafir when I could go to that person, buy them dinner, and then they could become a Muslim? So it went from hatred of anyone who wasn't Muslim to respect for anyone who wasn't Muslim, to try and I was taught then afterwards that it's your akhlaq it's the way you are, your character, that will bring people to Islam. If you want to revert people to Islam, then don't go shouting in their face. Just be yourself. Buy them food. My teacher, he's quite a funny guy. He said the best dawah is food. The best dawah is to buy someone a meal. Just go find a homeless person, buy him a meal, and talk to him. Find out their story. Don't talk. Let them talk. And then show them how Muslims are meant to be. And that's how I went from being an extreme person to being what I am today. Because I was involved in a very Saudi-based Wahhabi movement at the start, and I'd be giving out books about how any other sect of Islam, Sufi, Shia, they're all kafir and all this, and I can't believe what I was doing when I look back at it now. I took my Shahada with just that girl there, actually, in college. I took my Shahada, and the only reason she was there was to make sure that I said it in Arabic correctly. I didn't want to make it public at first. I mean, going back to tell my grandparents, hang on guys, I'm a Muslim now, wasn't the easiest thing in the world. To try and explain to my granddad that I can't have a beer with him in the afternoon, or I can't have a pork sausage for dinner for breakfast in the morning. That was a few months of long debates and discussions for them to start accepting, okay, he's a Muslim now. They kind of thought it was a phase. They thought, oh, it'll pass. My granddad to this day makes a joke that Jesus will come back into your heart, kind of thing. And then I turn around and say, well, maybe Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will come into your heart and you'll accept Islam. And we have this little joke now and again. But yeah, they took a long time to accept it, which I don't blame them for. It goes against when you're born a Catholic, you stay a Catholic. It's hard to imagine going into a faith, especially a faith that's made out to be what it is now by the media. They were very scared for me, very worried that my granddad made sure straight away, oh, you're not getting involved in those Al-Qaeda lot, are you? That's the first thing he said to me. So it took quite a lot of discussions to teach him that I'm not some person who's going to go do something stupid. I follow Islam, I don't kill people. It took me about a year to realise, hang on a second, I lost why I became a Muslim in the first place. I became a Muslim for the love of Allah, for the beauty of the Quran. I didn't become a Muslim to go around shouting at people and telling them this and that, and this is anger, this isn't love. This is meant to be a religion of love. These guys, they keep talking about peace, but they're going around yelling at people, telling them that telling Muslim men who are walking out with just a moustache, if they don't shave their moustache and grow a beard, they're going to go to the hellfire. It didn't make sense to me after I used my logic. It took a while to use my logic because I was so romanticized by this whole brotherhood. I was taken in by it. That it took me a while to realize, hang on a second, what they're doing here isn't right. This isn't Islam. This isn't how we're meant to act. They'd say that you'd have to. They'd say you have to be like Omar. Be like Omar. When someone goes to Omar and asks them a question, you hit them and say, do it. Be like that. That's who you must look up to. And I'm like, well, why aren't we looking up to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why are we looking up to Omar? Why? And then when I started questioning that, that's when they started getting angry at me. When I started questioning about Omar, about Abu Bakr, about Uthman, then that's when they started to push me away and start getting angry at me and quite aggressive and quite. They didn't get violent. They looked like they were going to get violent. They very angry, up in your face, making you feel very intimidated. But obviously they never used violence inside the mosque. But they're not there at the mosque anymore. They're gone, long gone. I don't know where they're gone, but yeah, those people I got involved with at the start were very not the kind of people that I'd mix with now. When I first became Muslim, obviously, I was told the Shia are kafir. They worship Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and they hate Aisha, and they hate Abu Bakr, they hate Umar, they hate these beautiful people, they hate Muawiyah. And in those days they'd be saying Muawiyah, and then they'd be saying Radiallahu An after his name. And I didn't know anything about the Islamic history. Like, it was only after 2 years of being a Muslim that I started looking at the history of it. So when they started telling me about these people that curse Aisha, when you first become Muslim, you're taught to, especially in that school, you're taught to love Aisha completely. She's the mother of the believers. And when I heard, oh, they're cursing Aisha, they're doing this, they're doing that, and then they'd show you lectures by very, very extreme people who would say that you have to celebrate the death of Aisha and people like that. So these extreme Shia lecturers, they'd find this one lecturer who's nowhere near mainstream, very out of the community, but they'd find this one person, and then they'd say, all Shia think like this. All Shia say you must celebrate the death of Aisha. All Shia say you must celebrate Abu Bakr's death, Omar's death. You must hate them and everything like this. You must despise anyone who fought against Yazid, because Yazid was a good person. So that's what they told you. Sorry, that Yazid was a good person. So when I heard that these Shia, they were cursing these people, that they were angry with these people, that's when I started to think, I want to fight them. That's the mentality you have. You want to be physically violent towards them. That's how they teach you. They teach you, be violent, be angry, get angry with them, intimidate them. And they tell you this, and they don't want you to ever meet a Shia. They never want you. They say if you ever meet a Shia, either get aggressive with them or walk away. Don't talk to them. Don't have a conversation with them, because they're very clever. That's what they teach you. So it wasn't until I actually did break that rule and had a conversation with a Shia, I was like, hang on a second, they're not doing what the other people said that they were doing. They had this really bad misconception that Shia would have these things during Muharram where they'd go into a room, they'd switch the light off with men and women in there and commit zina with each other. And that was something that you're taught from the start, this is what they do. And then it wasn't until I met the Shia and I spoke to him and I said, do you do this? Do you switch the light off in a room and commit zina with people? And he laughed at me and he said, no Shia has done this. This isn't part of Islam. So then I started questioning that, and he just gave me a book. It was a book about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and Kabbalah. And then I started to read about Shia Islam, and it wasn't until I read about it, I saw a few lectures about it by moderate lecturers, not the extreme one that they were showing. I started to realise, hang on a second, okay, now I need to look at the history. because it's just like when I became a Muslim. It's just like, there's the facts right in front of you. How can you dodge the facts? So I must read these facts. It started properly when I started to realise that Sahih Bukhari wasn't as Sahih as I thought it was. I started to find hadith that contradicted each other. So I was thinking, okay, well, you take this book to be completely Sahih, yet there's contradictions here. How can you have a Sahih book that has contradictions? That doesn't make sense. And being a historian, because I do a history degree, being a historian, you're taught to read the source of the certain thing. And there was one hadith I read in there that if it wasn't for your families, the Prophet would burn down your house if you didn't go to Jummah prayer. And I was like, that doesn't sound like my Prophet. My Prophet speaks of love, speaks of compassion. At Taif, when they were throwing stones at him, he was compassionate. He showed compassion everywhere. And I was like, you forgot what you say at the start of every surah. You say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What does that mean in English? Most merciful, the most compassionate. So you're taught that Allah is merciful and Allah is compassionate. So if He's merciful and compassionate, why aren't we being merciful and compassionate, kind of thing? So that's when I started to question this Wahhabi. And this is when I started to actually speak out against Wahhabism quite publicly. In the Sunni masjid that I went to, I'd speak out quite publicly against any Wahhabi that was there, because they were getting to the youth, and getting to the youth is where you get the problems. Because it's so easy to infiltrate the mind of a youth, to make them believe something, that they'll grow up believing it. And then there's never going to be any kind of talks between Shia and Sunni. There's never going to be any, probably will never be complete unity, but there'll never be any friendliness, being civil with each other. That won't be there if from a young age you're indoctrinating them with this, that everything is bid'ah, and you must grow a beard, and you must pray standing next to each other, and you must be like Omar. You have to be like Omar. This mentality that gets to the youth is what I spoke out against, and actually led me to going to a Shia masjid in the end, and meeting with a Shia sheikh who I spoke to, and I got to admit that meeting with him, speaking with him, I came out and I felt that's the first time I've ever been to a masjid. That's how I felt at that time. That is the first time I've ever been to a masjid, even though I'd been going to the other masjid all the time. Because when I walked in, no one judged me because I was white, which is what happened in the other masjid. No one treated me with any kind of disrespect. Came up, hugged me, said hello, offered me a cup of tea, spoke to me. That level of respect that I felt, and the way that they were talking, I had to say, okay, well, this is the first time that I've ever felt at home in a masjid. There's beautiful brothers in the Sunni masjid, beautiful brothers, but there's problems there, and in the Shia masjid you don't get that. There was no problems, there was no angry people standing there yelling at me. Everyone was comforting, everyone listened to what I had to say. When I spoke, they were respectful of that. Because when I first came, I came there in Ramadan this year. The first time I went to a Shia masjid, and I prayed without the tawbah there. So I'm just praying on the carpet, and so people looked at me and they were thinking, why is he praying like that? And then it wasn't until after they questioned me and said, what school of Islam are you from? And then when I said that I'd become a Maliki Muslim then, which is obviously one of the schools of fiqh in Sunni Islam, they hugged me and said, MashaAllah, what made you come here? And I was like, I just want to learn about you guys. We're told something about you guys, but I want to see it for myself, what you guys actually like. And then after I went there a few times, these people, they were amazing. I have one now who calls me daily. I have one who I call Abu now. He's like my dad, basically. I go to his house 3 times a week and spend time there, meet his sons. And he treats me like his own son. And that sense of unity, that sense of community is just something that I'd never seen before. I'd started to believe in Shia Islam about 7 months ago, but obviously it wasn't until about Ramadan time that I actually fully accepted Shia Islam. And it felt like I was being blessed, because you're taught a very angry way of Islam by certain schools, and then Shia Islam, like intercession for example, being able to ask Ali, Hussein, Hassan alayhi salam to make dua for me, that feeling of being loved by the Ahlul Bayt, knowing that I'm a follower of them, that I love them, and that felt very homely. It felt very. It wasn't the same as when I said the Shahada. When I said the Shahada, it felt like, if you can imagine it, like a vacuum cleaner, like sucking all the sins out of your feet, kind of thing. That's what it felt like when I said the Shahada. It felt like washed. When I became Shia, it was kind of like it got filled up with just warmth. The love of the Ahlul Bayt just fills you up. I cried like a baby for about half an hour when I first became Shia. It was a beautiful moment. It was because you spend a lot of time when you become a revert searching for a place that you feel like you can call home, part of Islam that you feel safe with. And you search for it, and I've been Wahhabi, I've been Maliki, I've been Hanafi, I've been Shafi'i. I've gone through all of them over the past 4 years. And then none of them, certain aspects of them felt right, but none of them felt 100% this is correct. Like, I preferred the Maliki way because you pray with your hands down, that felt right to me. And when I found out Shia pray with your hands down, I was like, okay, well that's good. But there was certain aspects of Maliki that I didn't accept. And then I think once I read the history, once I heard, I think it was Imam Khawi from Iraq. He was doing a lecture. It was in Arabic, but they had the English subtitles, and it was about the death of Ali alayhi salam. And I saw in that, in a lecture, there must have been about 100,000, 200,000 people there, and you saw leaders of the countries there, sitting in the crowd full of normal people, just crying. Everyone was crying, and like they're so united in their grief for what happened to the Ahlul Bayt, that through that I was just like, this feels like a family. It feels like you are part of a family. Whereas before, it was like the Hanafi stay with the Hanafi, Maliki stay with the Maliki. It's when you become a Shia, everyone's family. It's a feeling you can't really express into words fully, but it's kind of like when you've been adopted and then you find your real parents 20 years down the line, and then when you find them, you have that moment of just pure joy that you're part of the family again. And that's the only way I could probably express how it felt to become Shia. I learned that Islam wasn't harsh, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't some vengeful God that's trying to shove us all in the hellfire. A man that I met, a beautiful man, said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a parent to you. He will watch over you, and when you do something wrong, it's not that he's angry, it's that he's disappointed. And that feeling of disappointment of a parent is bad, but the fear of disappointment of Allah is that hurts more. I'd rather him be angry than disappointed. And that the whole love that you feel for the Ahl Bayt, the whole, when you all cry together when you're hearing a lecture, or when you all are just united. And then that's probably why I cried, because I felt like I'm part of something now. This is what my whole life has led to, this one thing. My mum had got seriously depressed with work. She got made redundant, everything, and she got involved with antidepressants. The doctor had prescribed her antidepressants, and the problem with antidepressants, they're very addictive. So we had a lot of problems at home, and we were very, very broken. My mother had a boyfriend. Boyfriend wasn't very well liked by the police. Our house got raided a few times by the police. And when you see your mother being hauled off in a police car for doing nothing wrong, and then being released the same day, when they admit that she's done nothing wrong, it really affects you, and it hurts quite a lot. So it was, when I was Salafi, I was like, Mum, you've got to leave him, you've got to stop doing this, I don't want you to go to hell. And one point I was in despair at the thought that my family would be going to the hellfire, because that's what they teach you. I mean, there was a lecture by Zakir Naik saying, a revert said to him, where's my father? He didn't say Shahada, where's he? Zakir Naik said he's burning in hell. So when you're a revert and you hear this, you get scared. And I was trying and trying and trying. And in that time when you're a Salafi, it's give them as much dawah as you can, tell them everything about Islam, do this, do that. And so it took a lot of heartbreak, and I was still telling Mum, "Well, be a Muslim, be a Muslim, be a Muslim." And the more I was like pushing her to become a Muslim, the more she was leading away from it. And then my sister moved with my grandparents. So she was with my grandparents. I lived with my mum for another few months. So that at this point, I'd calmed down quite a lot. This was during the point of me looking into Shia Islam. So that caused me to calm down a lot, and it was through my actions then, making Mum a cup of tea, washing the car for her, doing the washing up for her, cooking her a meal, making sure that she knew that at her feet lay paradise for me, making sure that she knew that she was one of the most important people to me. So after that complete change in my character from being very strict, do this or you're going to hell kind of thing, to being, okay Mum, can I do this for you, can I do that for you, can I take you out, can I do this, and never talking about Islam, just acting like a Muslim should. And then that, alhamdulillah, I believe that's why she said her Shahada. It was purely because of the way I acted then. I also, during Laylatul Qadr, I told her to make dua, and she made dua. On the phone I taught her the prayer in English, "Oh Allah, send peace and blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad." And I taught her that in English, and she said, "Okay, I'll say that." And I said, after you said that, make dua for something that you want. And then on Eid I got a text saying, "Liam, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of Allah." So I got that message, and that my sister, when I became Salafi, she was very scared about me. She couldn't talk to me, kind of thing, because she'd walk out in a dress that didn't cover her knees or something, and I'd be getting angry about it. If I was walking down the street and I saw a boy looking at her, I'd want to go and hit the boy, kind of thing. If she ever brought a boyfriend back to the house, I'd be angry, I'd be upset, I'd be yelling at her and everything like that. And then that was just pushing her further and further into what she was doing. Because I'm a brother, but I feel a lot like a father figure to her as well, because I'm that much older and I've helped raise her, that when I see her doing these things, it worries me, it scares me. And in those days, I was taught to turn fear into anger. If I yell at her enough, then she'll stop doing it. If I do this or do that, she'll stop doing it. And it didn't work. It pushed her to do it more. So part of the blame on what she did was on me for saying what I did. I'm pushing her away from... I didn't act like a Muslim, I acted like some angry guy who was walking around in a thobe. It wasn't a good time for her. And then now I am what I am. She's very respectful when I'm praying. She'll turn whatever music she might have on in her room. She'll pause any film she's watching or something like that to respect that I'm praying. If I'm praying and Nan and Grandad call for food, she'll be like, Liam's praying right now. He'll be down in a second. So it's turned from a hating Islam to now being respectful of it and being kind towards it, and not... She was telling me that someone in school said something about Muslims, and she jumped on the thing to attack this person, to be like, no, this isn't Muslims, my brother's Muslim, and explaining all the good things that I was doing and the good things that Muslims do. So it was that change in me that helped my sister from being someone who would probably come to a point where she couldn't talk to me at all. So now she'll come to me and she'll tell me any problem. Me and her are very close. She'll tell me everything. And I believe that's purely because I've adopted the ways of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I've adopted the ways of the Ahl Bayt on how they treated their family. It's through those teachings that I've managed to build back up a relationship with my sister and my grandparents. Before I became a Muslim, I was very passionate about the oppressed. Palestine was, even now to this day, Palestine is a big part of me. And when I started reading about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and what he had to go through and what happened in Karbala, that it hurts, but he is the biggest role model. I mean, even Gandhi said he learned how to fight oppression whilst being oppressed through Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He's one of the greatest role models we can have. I mean, even when I heard the story, and when you hear about Shimmer being on his chest and he's asking for water, and he said, Shimmer, I'll even intercede for you on the day of judgment if you get me water. When you read that, the man who destroyed everything that was pure in that time, when you read about that, and you read that even in his last moments, he was completely merciful. That's... If I could be 1% of what Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was like, then I will die a happy person knowing that my life's been complete. Ahl Bayt TV has helped me a lot in my journey through being a Shia. Through listening to lectures and discussions that go on. It's beautiful in the sense that you learn a lot about Shia Islam, and the fact that it's easily accessible to watch makes it that much better, because if I'd known when I first started to become a Shia that there was a channel dedicated to Shia Islam, I would have been watching it straight away. That was about 7 months ago, but I didn't know it existed. But now I found it in the last month, 2 months. I've spent, whenever I'm over Yahya's house, we'll end up watching Ahlul TV. The most touching one I watched recently was when they were talking about Jonathan Baki. And I found myself crying during that, when showing the talks in London, I believe, in the protest in London. And that made me feel, it's taught me a lot of lessons when you hear the stories of the Imams, you hear, you get to see like pictures of Kabbalah, mashallah, which are beautiful, Najaf, things like that. And I'd be quite confident in saying if it wasn't for Ahlul Bayt TV, then I'd be Shia, but I would not be as knowledgeable of Shia Islam as I am right now. I probably would have taken longer to accept Shia Islam if it hadn't been for Ahlul Bayt TV. I would have accepted it eventually, but I think it was during one of the talks, and I think the subject was Muta, I think. And when you're taught about Muta from the Sunni side, you're taught that it's basically zina, and then when you learn that there's a dowry paid, it's completely respectful, the woman has to agree to it as well. It's not just like you go and then you grab one random, because this is what you're taught. You go, you grab one random woman, and then that's it, that's done. You're taught that, and yeah. And then when I saw the hadith, and this is because this was the last thing that stopped me becoming a Shia, was Muta. It was the question of Muta. That was the last thing that stopped me becoming a Shia. And when I saw the hadith that the Sunnis used to ban, that say it was completely banned, it's a hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam. On the Battle of Khaybar, he said that Muta, donkey meat and garlic was banned. And then I agree with this hadith. This hadith is agreed upon, but then it's a temporary ban. And if anyone says, well, how do you know it's a temporary ban? You say, well, do you eat garlic? Garlic was banned at the same day, in the same hadith. Of course it was a temporary ban, because if it wasn't, then you wouldn't be eating garlic right now. And if you look at most food that we have is garlic based. So when I read that hadith, and I realised, okay, Muta isn't this whole thing where you go grab some random woman and have your way with her, and then that's it, done, you don't need to worry about it, problem solved kind of thing. That's when I started to realise, okay, well, that's the last thing that was standing in my way. So thanks to Ahlul Bayt TV making that clear for me was the reason that was the last thing that I needed to accept Shia Islam. I'm sure I would have found the answer somewhere else eventually, but because I saw it on Ahlul Bayt TV, and then because I saw it, I researched it, and because I researched it, that was the last problem solved then, and then that's when I completely accepted Shia Islam. So that was thanks to Ahlul Bayt TV, so I'm very grateful.